Tea with T cells. This is Marta.
I am Shafqat. Tea with T cells.
Today we're gonna interview Shafqat and ask him a little bit more about his journey into academia.
Yes, and before we do that, we will do our customary tea fact. And today's tea fact actually comes from Bangladesh, where I was born, as I mentioned previously, and we'll talk about later on. There is a region in Bangladesh called Sri Mangal, where there is a 7-layered tea. So it's tea with 7 different layers, and they're all different colors, and they have slightly different tastes.
Interesting.
And I've actually had that tea before.
Is it good?
Some of it is good. It's a bit overhyped, I think, just like most things on TikTok. You can go on TikTok and look at it, the 7-layered tea.
Yes.
It's worth a try. It's tea.
Yeah, definitely something. Should give it a go.
Yeah.
Nice.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
So, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm a little bit under the weather. You might be able to hear it in my voice. So if I cough or sneeze, please excuse me.
Yeah, we've just said that there are quite a few people being ill around us. So, yeah.
Hopefully not COVID.
Yes, hopefully not COVID. But if you're ready, we can jump into the content of this podcast. So as we discussed in the first episode, Shafqat is academic lecturer in immunology at Sheffield Hallam University. He also does his own research and he comes from Ireland. So we decided to interview Shafqat today because he has a lot of interesting things to say and he can explain
I think you're building me up a bit too much here.
He can explain us a little bit more about his research topic and just explain a bit more what the immunology actually is for those that don't know about that.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with the fun science fact about immunology. As you know, Shafqat been in radio recently just a couple of times, and he always has an interesting fact related to immunology to say. So do you have any other fact you could share with us?
Yeah, today's fun fact is maybe a little bit more complicated, but it's actually a really interesting topic. There's been some recent discoveries in this thing called transgenerational memory. So some of you may know, some of you may not know. Our immune system is very good at remembering things, events, infections. But there's been recent discoveries which show that actually we can pass some of this memory onto our progeny, into our future. This does not work in humans. It's still in animal research.
Interesting.
But I think it's just fascinating that we can actually pass on memory to our progeny. And we can talk about this later on because I think it will come up again because it's part of things that I find absolutely fascinating in immunology.
Interesting. It would make sense from the evolutionary point of view. But as you said, let's talk about it a little bit more later on.
Yeah.
So, Shafqat, where are you from and what is your background? You've mentioned you come from Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
We are like right now in England, in Sheffield. How did you ended up here?
I have probably quite a complex journey story. Although actually in academia it's not that uncommon for people to have they went all over the place, and a little bit the same for me. So I was actually born in Bangladesh, as I've mentioned a few times already. And this is probably the last time I'm going to mention it. Very early on, at a very young age, we left Bangladesh. My dad, he's a doctor, he's an anaesthetist, and he moved abroad to do his advanced training things that doctors do. And so obviously we moved with him. So I think I was about 4 when we left, and I spent most of my life in Ireland. I went to school there, did all of my normal school things that you do in Ireland. Great schooling system in my experience. And then from there, and actually quite STEM focused, which could be a good or a bad thing. I don't know. It depends on which side of the fence you're on. And then I went to university, did my undergraduate degree in Ireland at Trinity College Dublin, where I was actually part of the first batch to do a degree in immunology there. So they had just started this brand new degree in immunology at Trinity College Dublin, and I was the first year that did that degree. It has now grown into a much bigger thing. They've got the whole division. They churn out Nature papers like nothing. So it's turned into a real, big place for immunology. But yeah, when I had started, it was still quite nascent, quite young, quite exciting, to be honest. So yeah, and then I went from there, did my degree there, and then I went to Glasgow to do my PhD. I worked with Professor Paul Garside and Dr. Megan McLeod, who are obsessed with autoimmunity, rheumatoid arthritis in particular, for Professor Paul Garside. He spent his whole life working on it.
Mm.
And in the case of Dr. Megan McLeod, immune memory. So you'll start to look at the connection of my interesting fact.
Yes.
But she works on immune memory. I mean, she probably won't thank me for saying this, but what I would like to say, classical immune memory. So she works on like T-cell memory, which is where we learned about immune memory first. Whereas my interest in immune memory is more about the innate immune system, which is only very recently coming into it. But anyway, I was interested in memory. I needed skills in science. I needed to go learn how to do experiments and learn how to do science, ask questions. I went there. Great place, Glasgow, to do science, I think. I think Glasgow has got a perfect size to enrichment ratio, because if you go to some places, it can be too big and there are too many people, and that makes it a bit challenging sometimes to navigate things. Glasgow is small, but not too small that you can't do anything. And I was actually, and this is something that I probably will come on later on, because we speak a little bit about things that inspire us to do science. In Glasgow, I was really fortunate to be part of a group of PhD students and postdocs who had as much fun in terms of like banter, in terms of like going out for food, going out for drinks, as they did science. And actually we did a lot of our science while having a meal at a restaurant. So like and that culture and that atmosphere I have never found since I left Glasgow, and I miss it every day. And that I don't know if they still have it there. But there was a group of us PhD students, a group of postdocs, and some academics. We just had the best time. For 4 years, I felt like I was just living a dream. Wow. And that's kind of, and that kind of went from there. So my real passion in science sort of came from there. Obviously, I learned a lot. I did a lot of cool science as well. But that's one thing that I really want to replicate in my lab, because I'm an early career researcher, and that's been my goal from then, that I want to have a lab where we do our science while having a lot of fun.
This is definitely a good goal to have, and I must admit that it does sound like a dream. Yeah. I think that our department here in BMSC is not too far from what you're just saying. Mm-hmm. I think being a PhD student here is very similar. We do go out a lot, and we do a lot of interesting things outside of doing science, but also we love doing science. So I think the period of like PhD can be quite lonely for some people, but I think our department is quite good at having fun, call it this way, and just supporting each other. And I absolutely love the fact that you're trying to replicate your experience in your lab, because it is so important. And it's something to emphasize as well, that PhD research is going to be lonely for people that choose to be lonely. But if you go out and if you're in a good environment, it's probably going to be the best time of your life. Yeah. And somebody told me that as well when I started PhD, that go enjoy the next 4 years, which is going to be the best 4 years of your life. And I was like, interesting to hear it. But I must admit that there is something in it, and I absolutely love it.
I also think, and you can relate to this, PhD can be pretty challenging. There's a lot of ups and downs. When your experiment goes terribly, you've had a bad meeting with your supervisor, etc. You need that support. You need to be able to go out for a meal or a drink or whatever it is that you're into with, because nobody else understands the pain of a PhD student than another PhD student. Yes. So you need to be able to go out for that meal and then just vent and get it out of your system and then come back in again, be re-energized. Also, some of my best experimental ideas came from these meals and drinks, because you just talk to your fellow students or your fellow academics about an experiment you did and something that didn't work. And then in that relaxed environment, they will tell you, well, have you tried this? And you thought, no.
Nice.
So then you just go and try it. So yeah, I'm a big proponent of that.
Yeah, it's like a therapy to talk to colleagues,
Yeah.
PhD students,
Yeah.
or I guess other researchers.
Yeah.
One thing going back to your story, one thing you mentioned, you did your undergrad degree in Ireland and you jumped straight into the PhD. So how easy or how difficult did you find it? Because it's not unusual route. A lot of people think that they need to do master degree before starting a PhD. What is your opinion about that?
I think this kind of depends on a few things. So it depends on where you did your degree and what your degree was like, because these things are taken into consideration in a PhD interview. So in the UK, most degrees are 3 years. Most undergraduate degrees are 3 years, and they don't have a lot of time to get hands-on lab experience, which is why I think in that case they need to develop that skill, usually in a master's, in an MRes or an MSci or something like that. But in Ireland and also in Scotland, we do a 4-year degree, and in my case, almost all of my final year was just working in a lab. So I had developed those skills. They were evident in my CV. And then when I went for interview, we spoke about that. So I think if you have the skills, also you may have the chance to develop those skills in the summers. So if you spend a summer doing a placement, again, put that in your CV, talk about that when you're applying for your job, for your PhD position, mention it in your interview, make sure that comes across. And I think then it's okay. Of course, you have to be very privileged and fortunate to also have done really well in your degree. And that's not just about your ability, as we know very well. It's about your circumstances, your family support, economic circumstances. A lot of those things come into. And again, I was very fortunate. I was very privileged. I had the opportunity to have some replacements in many different places, some interesting places. So that then gave me the CV to then be able to do that. I do remember I didn't apply for too many PhD posts. I applied, I think, for 3. I interviewed for all 3 of them. One of them offered it to me on condition that I do a master's. So this was at Cambridge. It was at University of Cambridge.
Okay.
And they said, we will take you on, but we want you to do a master's first here. So they offered me basically a master's and then a route into the PhD. And I didn't want to waste another year of my life.
Fair enough.
So I said no thanks. I did another interview at Heidelberg in Germany. It's the molecular biology EMBO, European Molecular Biology. I forgot what the O stands for. It's a very big research institute. And I was unsuccessful for that one. And then the other one I did was this one in Glasgow. What I would say is start as early as possible if you're applying for PhD posts. I started, so my final year exams were in May. I started, I think, September or October the year before.
Oh, already?
And I already had my post conditional offer before I started revising for my exam. So it was in
nice.
February or March I had my offer. Again, if you don't get it, don't lose hope. Keep going, because not everybody has the same experience. Yeah. Like I mentioned, I was very privileged. So
you're saying very privileged, but at the same time, it's very easy to discredit the fact that you also worked probably very hard, because university isn't an easy thing to do.
Everybody works hard. In my experience, everybody works hard. People who are here, you, me, everybody who wants to go and do big things in science or anything big in life, they don't not work hard, but not everybody gets there. And I think that's
true.
I think there's a lot of science is full of serendipity, and you have to work hard, but everybody works hard, and the rest of it is your privilege and your serendipity, I think.
Sometimes it's knowing the people as well. Sometimes it's being in a good place at the right time.
Yeah, but that's privilege. So I remember my first day in Glasgow, I went in, there was a presentation in a journal clubby type thing, did that, and then we went for a drink. You can already get the theme of Glasgow.
Scotland.
Yeah. Went for a drink, and I was sitting next to one of the professors in my lab, and he Yeah, he was in my interview, actually. I just remembered. And he said, we had basically decided that unless your interview was complete disaster, we would give you the post. And I was like, oh, why? And he was like, it wasn't because of your CV, because everybody's CV looks pretty similar at that stage. It was because of one of your references. It was from one of the big professors in immunology at Trinity College Dublin.
Wow.
But that's because I was privileged. I happened to be in that place working with a professor who was really, really prominent. And yeah, I worked hard, and I also this is the thing that I mentioned about luck. So in Trinity, and in most universities actually, you are just allocated a tutor, right? So you go in first year, it's basically, they do some sort of juggling system. I don't know what they do.
Okay.
But they give you, let's say, usually a group of somewhere between 1 and 10 students per one tutor. I happened to be in the group with this professor who was really, well known. Yeah. Professor Luke O'Neill, if I would like to mention. He's also now basically a radio celebrity. He does radio shows every day in Ireland. He's written 2 books, I think, as well.
Wow.
Yeah, he's a really big shot. He publishes in Nature and Science all the time. And a lot of his work is in sort of immunometabolomics area.
Amazing.
Yeah. So great guy, fun guy as well. And we just hit off on a personal level. We just really got on. And so apparently my professor in Glasgow told me that his reference was 2 lines. It said, Shaft, ! Great guy, ! Hire him.
Amazing.
That's it. That was his reference for me. Said nothing about anything else. And they were just like, for someone like Luke O'Neill to take the time out to write that means you're good. So we hired you.
Wow.
And that's just luck, I think.
Wow. Okay. It's luck, but also, yeah, you needed some skills to actually gain this reference. So
yeah, but I think so. In that year there was 18 of us who did our degree, 18 immunology graduates that year. I think probably 16 of us would be good enough to do that. And actually, to be honest, there was a lot of us did PhDs. One of my group has her own lab in MIT. So there are a lot of high achievers in that group. Of course, I'm not denying that. But my luck is being there. Of course, and privilege is being in the room where it could happen, And not everybody has that opportunity.
Okay, long story short.
Yeah.
So, do you remember actually coming back to your undergrad degree? Like, do you remember why you picked immunology? Was it any particular disease that you were interested in? Was it just anything, or just a simple potluck?
Actually, I didn't pick immunology. I wanted to do physics, and I want to take it further back, actually.
Wow.
What started the whole science journey was, I don't know if you remember this. You might be a bit too young to remember this, although I don't know how old you are, but that's irrelevant here. But when I was, I think, 11 years old, there was the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster in America. I think this was 2002 or 2003, around that time. There was a space shuttle that the US sent to, I think it just went to orbit. I can't remember the full details. And then as they were re-entering Earth, Space Shuttle Columbia disintegrated. And I was, as an 11-year-old, I was obsessed with this. I watched the news day and night, learning about these scientists who went and gave their life for science in space. That started my obsession with science. I was like, I need to be a scientist. And then first thought, I need to be an astronaut. And then as I did more research, I was like, okay, astronauts are not just people that get on a spaceship and go to space. They're scientists that do research. I was like, okay, so I have to be a scientist to do research. And then naturally, a lot of space shuttle people, as I thought of them at the time, they were physicists because they worked on engineering, physics-y things. And I was like, okay, so I have to be a physicist. And I went to school and I studied physics. I did biology as well. I found all the sciences pretty interesting, but actually I did find physics the most interesting. And so in Ireland, again, you have the advantage of when you choose your undergraduate degree, you don't actually choose your specialty, you just choose a generic, so I just want to study science. So you enter in first year with the possibility of doing anything you want to do. So in first year, you pick modules, which are like a bit of biology, a bit of physics, a bit of chemistry, and then You
Okay.
taste it out at the university level. You interact with researchers and then you decide. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do physics. And then the other thing that really piqued my interest in school was genetics. And I was like, okay, so physics or genetics, one of those two.
Yes, difficult choice.
Yeah, so then I chose that. I chose science. And in first year, I realized I absolutely hate genetics.
Oh, no.
So definitely not that. And physics was interesting, but physics experiments just didn't really, like the lab work in physics didn't really fill me with joy.
Okay.
And I discovered immunology because obviously we did a little bit of immunology in school, but it wasn't too much. But obviously we did a lot of immunology in our part of our undergraduate degree in first year. And that's sort of what skewed me in that direction. And then, yeah, so that's how I ended up doing immunology.
Okay, interesting. Not that simple journey, but at least you got there and you knew that you wanted to do immunology. Okay, so we know how you picked immunology, how you ended up in Glasgow doing your PhD, but what happened after your PhD? Did you decide to do postdoc, as a lot of researchers do, or did you go to work in industry? How did you end up in Sheffield?
So this is where I think a lot of people can probably relate with me more. So coming towards the end of my PhD, I wasn't too sure what I wanted to do. I really enjoyed my PhD, unlike maybe not everybody enjoys their PhD, but I really enjoyed it. I did, I think, pretty well in it as far as things go. I mean, I passed. And I had a chat with my supervisor, again, sort of beginning of my final year of my PhD. I was like, so what should I do next? And she was like, well, whatever you want to do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then I started talking to people in industry, sent a few emails out. They were all very forthcoming. This is one advice that I would give to anybody who wants to do a career in science, maybe anything really, is people love to have an informal chat. Just send them an email and say, hey, I love what you do and I would love to know more about it. Can we have a chat? And then they will spend hours of their lives chatting to you about it.
Is it?
Yeah. And that's how you get an interview for almost any job you apply for.
Because
they have already met you. You have made an impression on them. You have showed them that you love what they do. So why won't they call you for an interview? You know?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Definitely a good tip to give to researchers right now.
Yeah. So yeah, spoke to loads of different people. And then basically I realized that I don't know, I'm not sure if I want to stay in academia forever, but I definitely enjoyed my lab work, my PhD, and I want to do more of that. So that naturally led to a postdoc, I think.
Yeah.
So again, similar to my PhD, applied for a few different positions, did a few different interviews. I was offered a few different posts, and eventually I went to work with Dr. Amy Saunders. At the time, she was at the University of Manchester. She's now moved to Lancaster, but at the time she was in Manchester. So that's where I did my postdoc. I was there for 4.5 years.
Wow.
As a postdoc at the University of Manchester. And that was a very different atmosphere to Glasgow. I felt like I grew up almost instantly as I arrived. So Amy was the most amazing boss. I have never seen in my entire 4.5 years there a day where Amy was upset or down about anything. She's always got a smile on her face. She's always super cheery. She's always very supportive of what you do. And what I absolutely love about Amy, if she's listening to this, is I used to often go into meetings with Amy feeling like I have done nothing this week or I have not achieved what I wanted to achieve. And then I would come out of those meetings feeling like I could run for 10 hours for Amy.
Wow.
She was so good at motivating.
Amazing.
And yeah, that was amazing. But beyond Amy, I felt like Manchester was a very serious place. In Glasgow, it was all about fun and doing research. Manchester was all about serious and doing research.
Right. Big city.
Yeah, I think it was more like there was a lot of very young academics in Manchester who were just sort of setting up their careers, and they were all like, we need to work really hard and be really serious about giving our careers a good push. And that created that atmosphere, which I think, again, works for a lot of people. But I think that didn't really work for me. I found that to not be that motivating. I think another factor was COVID. So COVID appeared halfway through my postdoc. And that, I think, derailed things a little bit as well. Yeah, so I think 4.5 years, almost exclusively doing a postdoc. I did some teaching as well at that time, and that's where I developed sort of my teaching interest. And then I did a year of a teaching fellow in Manchester, so I was like almost exclusively teaching for a year.
Okay.
And then I came here to Sheffield.
Okay. And right now you are an academic lecturer. Are you doing any research at the moment?
Yeah, so it's been just over a year that I've come to Hallam. So I'm still in the process of essentially setting up my research. At the moment, I do a lot of teaching. Sheffield Hallam is a teaching-focused university. So whereas in the research-focused universities, you get given more time to build your research portfolio and profile, here we get less time to do that because we dedicate a little bit more of our time to teaching. So obviously it's taken a bit longer. Yeah, I do have a research student in the lab at the moment. She's actually just very recently started.
Okay.
So I've been running in and out of the lab lately, which is exciting for me. I've also got undergrads who are starting to develop some of my ideas as well. At the moment, I'm applying for a lot of grants. I would like to have a PhD student as soon as possible, and that will really be the sort of jumping
forward for you.
Yeah.
So what is your research focus right now, specifically?
My research focus has almost always been about understanding cellular dynamics of immunity. So how immune cells, in particular, do different things in different places at different times. And my sort of twist or flavor to that has always been studying immune cells that are, let's say, less sexy, less well studied, in some cases newer. Unpopular.
Call it this
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it's unpopular. I think they're becoming more popular now.
Okay.
But things like gamma delta T cells, which you may or may not have heard of. Everybody hears of T cells, but not gamma delta T cells. Things like natural killer cells, things like innate lymphoid cells, which were discovered 2010s-ish, so relatively recent.
15 years ago. Only.
Yeah, relatively recent. Those things, they're still not that well understood in many contexts.
Could you explain us briefly what your main research topic is?
So I'm still at an early career stage of research. I'm only in Hallam for about just over a year now. So still in the nascent stages, but as I mentioned about the different cell types that I'm interested in, my research would be looking at understanding what those cells do in the context of autoimmune diseases such as psoriasis, dermatitis, also in the context of maybe some cancers. So we don't understand very well how immune cells get in and out of cancers. So we might do some work on that. And then there's another topic which I haven't started any work on, but something that absolutely fascinates me is, and someday I would love to work on this, is pregnancy. And a few different reasons why it fascinates me. One is a baby is 50% mother, 50% father, which from the perspective of your immune system is 50% foreign, 50% self. And the immune system kills anything that's foreign. Why doesn't it kill the baby? We have some understanding of that already. That's one reason why I would love to study that. Another one is in science, in the world in general, unfortunately, diseases or issues that affect women tend to be understudied. And pregnancy, despite being absolutely essential to human survival, is relatively poorly studied. We don't really understand very well why a lot of the complications in pregnancy arise. The idea of miscarriage is a taboo in our society. And there's a very strong immunological connection there due to incompatibility sometimes between two partners. And this is not the woman's fault. This is just incompatibility. You can have miscarriages. And again, nobody talks about these things. We don't understand the mechanisms that well. It has just about in the last 10 years or so we've started to understand that. But yeah, I'd love to work in this area going further.
Interesting. Sounds like another postdoc project or another, your first PhD project.
Maybe. Yeah.
something to start. Very interesting topic. So with relation to your lab, obviously, as we said, lab can go in all different directions. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't. Do you have perhaps any recent discovery or finding from the literature or from your own research that you found particularly exciting, something that just made you believe again in what you do?
I can give you examples from both my work and the literature. And this will bring back what I mentioned at the very beginning about transgenerational memory. So this is a relatively new discovery, transgenerational memory. It was, I think it was last year, 24, that there was a paper in Nature, I think, I can't remember exactly, which showed transgenerational memory in mosquitoes and in, I think, Drosophila, which is obviously the common fruit fly. So essentially, they found that these animals, certain immune cells in your body can modify the genes that you pass on to your offspring in a way that certain things get passed on in your immune memory. So for example, if you're a mosquito who has been exposed to a particular type of toxin which might kill you, but you survived, you've managed to change your genome in a certain way and you've passed it on to your offspring. So your offspring are now resistant to those types of attacks from toxins. More recently, there's been some research on long COVID, and we now also think that in humans, there is some evidence that with certain stem cells in our body, which give rise to immune cells. So our immune cells are constantly coming alive, doing their thing, dying, and we've got these stem cells which replenish that pool. So when they die, our stem cells give birth to more immune cells. So there's evidence in some COVID patients that these stem cells can undergo genetic changes with COVID infections, and then the immune cells that they give rise to after that are slightly different from the immune cells that came before COVID infection, and they've got some sort of a memory response. So in particular, these are monocytes that can do these.
So is it the memory beneficial to us that they will recognize COVID, or?
In that study, unfortunately not. So it seems like a lot of the symptoms of long COVID could be associated, or some of the symptoms of long COVID could be associated with this essentially dysfunctional memory. But it opens, as a sort of mechanistic scientist, I love to understand mechanisms. I think it opens the door for us to understand the beneficial memory side of things as well. Because for the longest time, immunologists only believed in adaptive immune memory, so your T cell memory, your B cells that produce antibodies, that memory, which we use to develop vaccines. And we didn't really believe, and even now we go to conferences and have arguments about innate immune memory. Are these cells ever remembering? But I think the evidence for that is stacking up and stacking up and stacking up. And it's starting to open that door where we can start convincing people that, yes, these cells can also remember. They just remember in a different way. Yeah.
So it may be a little bit of controversial question, but if you have autoimmune condition, does it make you more prone to COVID, or does it actually do the opposite? Because autoimmune conditions mean that your immune system basically attacks certain organ, certain cells of your body, and it's very aggressive, very strong. Do you think that from your research, from what you've read, would it make the person with autoimmune condition less likely to get COVID or more likely to fight it faster?
That's a fascinating question. I can answer it in sort of two different ways. One is the evidence that we have seen. So COVID has already happened. We've seen a lot of evidence. Generally speaking, people who have autoimmune diseases have been immunocompromised, and so their reaction to COVID has been worse than the general population. Now, what I can't say is that because they had autoimmune disease, or is that because they were on treatment for autoimmune disease? Because the treatment essentially dampens down your immune system, so makes it less aggressive. And that could make you susceptible to infections. We know that. So it could be because of that. But on a sort of theoretical level, I think if you were at an early stage of an autoimmune disease, so you had just started developing this disease, it could make some logical sense that you would be more protected from an infection like COVID, because you have a very active immune system which might be able to deal with or cope with that sort of an infection. Although with the caveat that you have an active immune system, but it is active against a very particular part of your body. So it might not also apply.
That's what I heard as well. But I wanted to ask you that autoimmune condition is usually targeted towards one type of cells, one organ, not COVID per se. So very interesting. But you said that autoimmune patients usually undergo COVID in a worse ways.
Yeah. They were one of the protected groups during COVID in the UK. So they were told to stay indoors, avoid contact for much longer than the general population. Going back to the question you asked me, I realized that you mentioned something that I find interesting, or maybe from my own research, and I didn't mention my own research. But during my PhD, this is published work, so I can talk about it pretty freely. I actually discovered something that I found pretty interesting, which is my discovery. Of course, I find it interesting.
No bias here.
Yeah. I discovered that a particular sphingolipid, sphingosine 1-phosphate, which was very well known to regulate the trafficking of T cells, so the movement of T cells around your body. So very well known that it plays particular roles in allowing your T cells to move around your body. But I contributed to a discovery which found that this molecule also plays a role in how T cells decide to live and die, and also how T cells decide to accumulate or leave an inflamed tissue. So, for example, a psoriatic skin or an arthritic joint. So that was my small contribution to
Interesting.
That field. Yeah.
Okay. Would it be perhaps some kind of a target for the medications in the future, or?
There is already some drugs that target that pathway. The most famous and well-known one is fingolimod, FTY-720. It's used particularly in multiple sclerosis. So multiple sclerosis is a disease where you get inflammation in the brain. And essentially what happens is T cells migrate from the periphery, so the rest of your body, to the brain, and they cause a lot of inflammation. And this drug blocks the T cells from getting into the brain. And there is currently some research happening to try and understand whether this drug can also help in other autoimmune diseases.
Oh, right. Interesting. Because obviously with the medications against autoimmune diseases, the main focus was usually these pro-inflammatory cytokines, wasn't it?
So methotrexate is a little bit like a cancer drug. So it just dampens things down, kills things. But for example, there are anti-TNF, which is probably the best known biologic therapy in autoimmune diseases. So things like Humira or infliximab. So these are antibodies that bind to and neutralize TNF, which is produced in excess during autoimmune conditions.
So it is quite good medication to have if you develop autoimmune condition, I believe.
It depends on which one you have and what stage you're at. So you'll need to talk to a clinician about that.
Yeah. But I guess obviously they all have side effects, because when we were mentioning that they dampen your immune system, which means that if there is an outbreak of COVID, for instance, your immune system won't fight the infection as easily as healthy immune system would. So obviously, everything before taking should be always discussed with the doctors. We're not giving any advice here. So in terms of the immune system, there is a lot of information and misinformation out there about how to boost your immune system. And obviously there are some obvious things like having a sleep routine, eating well, just looking after yourself. But do you know any other methods to boost your immune system which are perhaps less well known?
I would start by saying the term boosting your immune system is a bit of a misnomer. I'm not a fan of this, because we've just spoken about drugs that can dampen our immune response. There are drugs that can boost your immune response. And the only time that we do any of those, dampen or boost, is something is wrong with our immunity. So the immune system is a little bit like, let's say, the police or the defense forces, where if you have an overreaction to something, if the police is constantly bashing people's doors down, that's not good. If you have an underreaction to something, crime is rampant, right? So in immunity, you always want to have the balance. You're trying to have this Zen zone where your immune system is doing the right things. Mm-hmm. So the term boosting your immune system is not good. I don't like that. What I like to use is we want a happy immune system. So what should you do to have a happy immune system? And actually, in this case, the pop media, the general ideas are pretty good. The immune system doesn't need anything massively different from everything else. Regular exercise boosts your immunity. Eating fresh fruit and veg boosts your immunity. And how does it do it? If we want to go into specifics, things like zinc and magnesium are actually part of immune stem cells producing immune cells. So if you've got good amount of zinc, good amount of magnesium, you get healthy immune cells being produced.
Okay.
So they're more functional. Vitamin D, another component of immunity. So there are immune cells use vitamin D to do particular functions. So again, having a good healthy levels of vitamin D is good. It doesn't boost your immunity. It just means you're happy. Your immune system is happy. It's got all the things that it needs to do its job. And that's basically it.
What about gut microbiome?
What do you mean by what about gut microbiome? That's a big question.
This is a big question. Yeah, I know obviously there is a bidirectional talk between gut and brain. And we know that a lot of immunity comes from the gut, which obviously is, I think, been researched more and more in the recent years. Mm-hmm. People always say to have a variety of different foods in your diet so you can enrich your microbiome, making sure that your microbiome can defend you just in case, can be at your favor. Is there any particular thing that you've researched in this area, or?
This is an enormous field now in immunology. And actually, the University of Manchester is one of the leaders in this field. So they do a lot of gut immunology. It is not quite my field. So I can't give you specific details, but what I can tell you is that, like you mentioned, there is a very strong connection between good gut health and good immune health. Mm-hmm. And that's because actually a lot of our immune cells lie just below that gut epithelium, and they're constantly interacting with your gut microbiota. So this is relatively new discovery, I'd say maybe the last 20 years or so. We always thought that actually the immune system was ignorant of the gut microbiota, and if there was some sort of a problem, they became aware of the gut microbiota and then they responded, and you got things like colitis and IBD, etc. But now we think it's an active relationship. So our immune system constantly interacts with our gut microbiome. There's a lot of evidence that having a healthy gut microbiome is directly correlated with good health in general, good immune health in general. I'm not an expert in that field, so I can't give you any more details on that, unfortunately.
That's why I think healthy eating, not eating ultra-processed foods and things that you just wouldn't find in your fridge that are in these sandwiches sometimes. This is definitely going to help, I think, your immunity on it. Is there anything surprising about the immune system that you could tell to people that they may not be aware of?
Yes. People think of the immune system as a constant. I was born with my immune system and that's the immune system I have. That's not true. Think of your immune system a little bit like a baby. It is constantly learning, it is constantly developing, and the more things you expose to your immune system, the more experiences it has in its life, the better able to cope with things it is, the better spazzy it is. So there's a lot of evidence that if you expose your immune system to a lot of different microbes, viruses from different environments, different climates, it's much less likely to become allergic, much less likely to become overactive or inappropriately active. So as a general advice, that's probably a very good place to start. It is constantly evolving. It needs constant nurturing in a passive way. As you mentioned, eat different types of food, eat healthy, expose yourself to different climates and environments. If you can, travel the world. You might be surprised, but if you go to, for example, India, which is very well known for Delhi belly might be bad for you in the short term, and that gives you diarrhea very acutely. So Delhi belly is, if you aren't aware, is if you go to Delhi, most people, the first time they go there, they get diarrhea. So that's why it's called Delhi belly.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's why it's called Delhi belly. It's partially because there's a lot of E. coli in the water. It's also partially because you are not used to that E. coli. So if you were to go back every year or two, it doesn't recur. And that's like exposing yourself to different species of things. Your immune system learns about it. It becomes more able to deal with those things. There's actually direct evidence that worm infections reduces your likelihood to get autoimmune diseases.
Oh, really?
Yeah. People are trying to extract things from worms and give it to people to see if they can reduce their likelihood or reduce their symptoms. So yeah, being infected with things, I'm not trying to encourage you to go and dive into a river full of schistosomes in Africa, but I'm just saying
Please don't do it.
Yes, I'm just saying that not all infections are necessarily bad. As part of your natural life, expose yourself to different environments, and then that should hopefully help your immune system. Also, wash your hands. Like, that doesn't mean you should have dirty hands, and because that can kill you.
And wash fruits before eating and vegetables.
Yes. But being over clean is also problematic.
Not good.
Don't sterilize your environment.
Unless you work with stem cells. But
yeah, any cells really. Sterilize the environment the cells are in, but not the environment that you are in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so since you are a lecturer and you have students doing research, you do your own research, could you tell us just briefly what would be biggest challenges you face in your work as a immunology researcher and lecturer?
I think this is not going to be anything groundbreaking. I think for all scientists, probably the biggest challenge is funding. And it is probably becoming more and more challenging, unfortunately, especially due to the events in the United States at the moment, which is terrible. I mean, they're cutting funding there, left, right, and center. But yeah, funding is a big issue. Always working on getting more funding. Other than that, I think another issue that I'm coming across, and this is more as my role as a lecturer, I'm finding that more and more young students are more difficult to inspire. And I don't know why. It's not their fault. I should make that very clear. I'm pretty sure it's not their fault. It's not that young people are not interested in things. It's just a problem that I see, that they're not that keen on doing things that are difficult, because everything we do is difficult. And it's not just us. Everything that everybody does that's worth doing is difficult. I just find that sometimes they find challenge pretty difficult to deal with. And that might be our problem. We may not be presenting challenge to them in the right way. We may not have created an environment which provides healthy spaces for them to fail and succeed. My gut feeling is social media has a big impact here. It has created this toxic environment where everyone must always be perfect and nobody can make mistakes, and they're just terrified of doing something wrong. Yeah. But I don't know. And that is actually one of my big ambitions as a lecturer, is to really try to inspire my students to say that it's worth doing hard things. You will fail sometimes, but you'll get up again and try something else. And if you don't fail, you will never succeed.
This is a very good attitude, and I absolutely agree with you, seeing the fact that people are not that inspired and willing to do difficult things comes, I think, a lot from the fact that nowadays we have very easy access to quick dopamine release. And if we have, let's say we scroll the phone in the morning, there is a very quick dopamine release. We are very happy for a short time. But then this makes us less likely to do these difficult things that are going to give more satisfaction by the end, but they are not going to give you quick dopamine to start from.
Yeah.
So the brain will prefer to do the easy, quick things that give you this dopamine. And this is basically your reward system in the brain. And it is also the dopamine, and all these neurochemicals are involved in addiction. And later on, things like that can lead to increased rates of depression and anxiety. So I think it's strongly linked to that.
I'm really glad you mentioned this, Marta. And I hope we can have somebody on here with more expertise who can talk about these things later on. I think, this is not my field, so I'm speculating here. I think there is growing evidence that this mental health epidemic we're having at the moment, and it's just getting worse and worse, social media is playing a big part of that. And I think that evidence will grow, it'll build, and it will come to a point where we'll be a little bit like cigarettes and smoking, where we will realize that these things are absolutely toxic to us and they're killing our brains and killing specifically the brains of our future generations.
Oh, yeah.
And I hope we get there as soon as possible so we can stop it.
I think that, was it New Zealand or Australia? They banned the use of smartphones.
Yeah, I think it was New Zealand. New Zealand, I think, yeah.
In kids, which I think is way around it. But yeah, we can leave it for one of the next episodes, because I think it is super important topic to actually spread the knowledge that what you do on social media with social media has a massive impact on your neurochemistry, your mental health and your performance, which, we weren't aware of probably when we started using them, but the growing evidence is there. So we can leave it for the next episode. Going back to your days as a researcher, would you say, is there a typical day for you as academic lecturer and researcher?
Yeah, I would say my typical day, one thing that people often don't appreciate is academia is very dynamic. No 2 days are ever the same, even though a lot of people think that it's very boring and I just get up and give a lecture and that's it. It's very dynamic, so my days can be very different. But if I were to give you a typical day, it would include things like having a very exciting meeting with a student about some data that they have just generated, which shows something really new and exciting, which might start a whole new journey in a different project. So first hour of my day, a great meeting, followed by, let's say, a tutorial with first or second year undergraduate students. And that can be very enriching and exciting in its own way, because I think there is no greater responsibility that a scientist or an academic can have than inspiring the next generation. And I take that really, really seriously. So my tutorials are very open. We have discussions about anything and everything in life. I like to think that my students go away a little bit more excited and interested in what we're doing. Then I might have a lecture, which is more sort of me standing at the top of a theater and giving a talk. But again, I try to make them pretty interactive. I have a lot of games and quizzes and things like that students interact with, and try to make them very relevant to their local area. So in Sheffield, I talk a lot about the diseases that happen in this area. That's more likely to pique students' interest. So again, try to keep them engaged. Then later on, maybe I spend an hour or two in a lab with another one of my lab students where I'm showing them how to do a certain technique. And then obviously sometimes we have to do some of the boring stuff, or you have a meeting with another academics, maybe talking about, is this mark for the student fair or not fair? So we spend a lot of time discussing marking and marks, which can be a bit of a administratively boring task. However, it's very important, of course. We need to make sure it's fair and marked properly. Yeah, so that's an average day. But like I said, my other average days could include a podcast, could include
like today.
Being on the radio, could include going on a tour, could include going to see lab facilities, collaborating with other people, going to a pub and having a drink over a research idea. Yeah, it's very diverse. It's very varied.
Working from the pub.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Pretty much. So you have a lot of responsibilities during the day, and it may seem like a lot to some people. And I think for colleagues in academia, they understand you probably very well with marking, with teaching, with researching. Having the balance is very important. So is there anything that you do to unwind after a difficult day or a week or a month?
That's a great question. As scientists, I feel like this is more, my colleagues would probably listen to this and think either that I'm a weirdo or that they're a weirdo. Scientists can be pretty obsessed with what they do, and sometimes that can be unhealthy, where they never switch off. And I've definitely gone through those phases. I think I'm trying to become more healthy in that sense. So yeah, I do some things to switch off. One thing that I do is animals. So I've got cats. I still have to spend a lot of time with my cats. At the moment, I don't have a fish tank, but I have, fun fact about me, I have set up a fish tank in every single workplace that I have ever worked in. And actually, one of your fellow PhD students has suggested that they will look after a fish tank if I set one up in your PhD office.
Amazing.
So it might happen in Sheffield Hallam.
This would be fantastic idea. I never thought of that.
Yeah,
but this would be fantastic idea.
I am an aquarium nerd. I can talk to you about the pH needs of specific species of fish from the Rio Negro it's one of the tributaries in the Amazon. Or I could
Very
also,
specific.
Or I could also talk to you about another separate fish species which has completely different needs from the Mekong River in Thailand. So
Useful fact in case you ever go to like, is it Millionaires? Like who
wants to be a millionaire?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, if the £1 million question is about fish, I think
you should go for it. Yeah, definitely.
Apart from that, I walk a lot. I like to go for walks. I like to cycle. So yeah, a bit of a mixture of different things.
Yeah, so it's not only research. You have time to also do all other things, have your own life.
Yeah.
And enjoy your own life as well, which is very important. Coming back to the fish, I think we should also think about having a campus cat.
Yeah, so actually in Trinity College in Dublin, we had a Trinity cat, a campus cat.
We had it as well in my undergrad.
Yeah, I think in Hallam it's a bit more difficult though because we have a city campus.
Yeah.
It's a bit too busy, I think, for a cat to just wander around.
It can be an indoor cat.
It can, I guess. I mean, I love the idea. I just don't know how you'd implement it.
We need to talk to some people in the department.
Estates, they're going to say no. I think if you want to have a campus cat, it just needs to happen like magically. It just appears one day and then it's just there.
We can think of that.
Yeah.
Let's leave it for now. Okay, so just to close down our conversation, because I think we've been talking for over an hour right now.
Yeah.
Is there any piece of advice that's stuck with you, either on science or in life?
Yeah, I'll give you two. One is always label your samples.
So important.
There is no such thing as too much information. You can put anything in that label because someday you're going to look at that tube and go, wait, what did I put in this again?
Oh, yes. Very good one.
So yes, over label, but please label your tubes. That is probably the most important thing that I can mention. Yeah, so that's definitely one, a very practical one. And then another one is never assume whether a professor has done it or a Nobel Prize winner has done it, that the calculations that they did or the methods that they wrote down for you is correct. You must go back and check because human beings, make mistakes. I learned this the hard way. So, in my first year of my PhD, I was given a protocol by one of the postdocs in the lab who has been there for many, many years, who was like the god postdoc of that lab. And I spent ages trying to replicate what he did, and it just never worked, and I just didn't know why. And literally it's because in one place, instead of 10 million, it was 1 million cell concentrations, and that made all the difference. And it was just a small little typing error, and it took me a year to figure that out.
Oh no.
Which is,
Oh no.
Yeah.
So talking about that, one of the final questions is, have you ever had a total lab disaster or a funny teaching moment you can share?
I wouldn't say I have had a lab disaster in the sense that something has disastrously gone wrong in the lab for me. I can tell you about a funny moment that happened in the lab. So this will expose my weirdness. I like to work really early mornings in the lab because it's just nice when there's nobody there. You can put your headphones on and do your own thing. And I always assume that at 5 a.m. in the morning, there's nobody else in the lab.
Oh, no.
The Cricket World Cup was going on at this time. So I was watching a lot of cricket. And the lab, in this lab, is a big long corridor with benches off it, like most labs. Some weird thing took over me, and I was like, I'm going to do like a practice bowling run down the corridor of this lab. So I'm doing like a full-on run, about to like launch my imaginary ball. And as I am about to launch that ball, my academic advisor just walks through the other door, and I'm like mid-run, and she's like, "What the hell are you doing?" And I'm just like, and I was just like,
Okay.
just having a bit of fun. I mean, it didn't cause a disaster, but it was just funny.
It makes me feel slightly better about all these stupid things I've done. That were seen by others. So you are not the only one.
I think this is part of you must have fun in the lab. It shows you how much fun I had in the lab that I've turned it into my playground, As long as it's safe and it's risk assessed.
Was it? Well, yeah. There is an aside, don't run in the lab, isn't it?
There was no sign in that lab.
I mean, it's kind of common sense, but
But everybody runs in the lab because they're in a rush to do things.
That's true, but yeah.
Anyway, don't run in the lab, but that was that was that.
All right, interesting. As I said, it makes me feel slightly better. All right, thank you so much for the conversation. I know that we've gone through a lot, and before we close down our podcast, I would like to just share if you have any particular advices to students that like to work as immunologists or go into academia.
I would say stick to it. Stickability, I think, is the biggest thing in science. If you really want to do it, it might take you ages. It might take you longer than some other people, but you've got your own time. So stick to your own time. You might have failures, you might have rejections, but just keep going. And eventually you will find a path that suits you. But most importantly, only stick to it if this is really what you love and this is really what you want to do. So it's about finding what you love. But this is pretty generic advice, I think.
In terms of any recommended books, podcasts, websites, do you have any?
Yeah, I would love to recommend Radiolab. I think I may have mentioned this to you before, Marta.
Yeah.
I can't really describe Radiolab, really. You just have to listen to it. They do like kind of investigative journalism, but for science. For a lot of parts, it's like scientific investigative journalism.
Interesting.
They don't just do science, they do non-science stuff as well. But they just go talk to scientists, and they have a really unique way of telling their story, which just drags you in. It's fantastic. I love it. Definitely recommend that. Books, I think I've also mentioned this to you before. Not really recent, it's from 2 years ago now, I think. I read Ultra Processed People, which by Dr. Chris Van Tilliken at Imperial College London, I think. It transformed my way of thinking about food, and I hope has made me a healthier person. And more importantly, I think it has made me appreciate other people who have health difficulties with regards to food, without knowledge, without knowing about things. They can't control it. It's not their fault. It's our fault, society's fault, to have let people down. It's a great book. One of the best nonfiction books I've ever read.
Wow.
And I really recommend it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Definitely something we could recommend. I mean, I did really enjoy that one. So I think that, it comes from both of us. Is there any place on the internet, any social media that our listeners could find you if they wanted to find out more, or if they would just wanted to follow you on social media?
Following up on all the demonization that I did on social media, I actually have left all social media. So I'm not on Twitter, I'm not on Facebook, I'm not on Instagram, TikTok, none of it. I have very recently opened a Blue Sky account, although I've got nothing in it at the moment. I've got a LinkedIn page because that's professional. Just search me on LinkedIn, you'll find me. And if you want to find me on Blue Sky, where I hope to build maybe something going forward, it's at Bacillus Addict. I've actually had this name. This is to be my Twitter handle as well. And I got this in my undergraduate years when I loved microbiology so much. When I turned into an immunologist. But yeah, I love Bacillus, so Bacillus Addict.
I love the idea. Yeah, I love the idea. We will put the links in the description of the episode, but you can also find us on Instagram, because we have an Instagram page where we will update you on new episodes, and have all the links there, hopefully. Thank you so much, Shafqat, for our long, very interesting conversation. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did here, and looking forward for the next one.
Thank you very much, and thanks for all the interesting questions. I think they were really, really, and some of them quite challenging.
But
yeah, really, really engaging. Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.